Throughout our lives, we set goals and make decisions to live our best possible lives. What holds us back from initiating conversations around death and the dying process?
I've said once before, we all want to live long, but we don't like to get old. But there is a corollary to that. We know that we are going to live long, but we don't want to think about dying.
Studies have shown that statistically, the highest amount of medical interventions happens in a person's life towards the end of one's life. And so we are inevitably going to face this as we get older. So for this reason, it is important for us to not only think about how we would engage with this dying process, but share these thoughts with our families, with our caregivers, and even with our doctors, so that they are in a better position to see that your choices and your wishes are carried out towards the end of life. And hospitals and medical faculty are now understanding that the patient's wishes, directly or through representatives, are extremely important to be documented and to be adhered to while planning treatments, especially towards the end of life. So these are some of the things I think would be something to think about when you are discussing the dying process and your own choices.
But Dr. Olinda, many of us don't understand the difference between a living will and a legal will.
Yes, so when I spoke about writing down your wishes, this at the end of life, this is what is formally called a living will or advance directives. It is a list of treatments or wishes of the patient that are written down and witnessed and formalized so that others may not contradict those wishes when the patient goes in for treatments.
I think it's interesting that you brought this kind of terminology between the extraordinary and the ordinary, which, as you said, sometimes it's so difficult because with the development of medical technology, what was ordinary, what was extraordinary becomes ordinary. And then we went to the more proportionate and disproportionate, and that is not only in terms of treatment but also financial resources. And the same thing applies to benefits and burdens.
Welcome back to the continuation of our conversation about a final journey. So, Dr. Olinda, is it possible for us to write this in the living will? And how early on should one start writing a living will? And what are some crucial decisions to be covered from a medical standpoint?
For the most part, people who engage with this process of writing a living will are those who have a chronic health condition and are now realizing that they are approaching the end of life. And those who have a sudden diagnosis of a terminal condition, and they realize that very soon they will be facing these kind of decisions. The other thing is people who are in early dementia or early diagnosis of Alzheimer's dementia. So such persons, while they are still of sound mind, they would like to put down what they would like to have done to them so that they can have a dignified death or a good death. Most of these patients are apprehensive about what will happen to them once they cannot decide for themselves. This is an important thing that we witness in medical care, where patients are anxious about what will happen. They are unclear about how the end will be. And many of them like to put it off and hope that their loved ones will make the right decisions on their behalf. But often there is a conflict between the patient's wishes and the family wishes, and then sometimes there is a conflict in the family themselves between two family members about what should be done and what should not be done. And this causes a lot of grief towards the end, even before the patient has passed away. There is the family feels traumatized, and the patient at that time may not be able to make a decision. So, this is the set of patients who normally write living wills. While they are of sound mind, they put down what they would typically accept when they are no longer able to make decisions for themselves. First of all, they mention a person who understands their wishes and who will take decisions for them. That is a very important part of a living will. The second is the kind of treatments they would like to avoid. Some patients are terrified of being in an ICU and strung up with tubes and bright lights, and the idea of them dying in that situation terrifies them. And so they write down that, this is something that they would like not to have happen to them, unless it has a benefit which the doctor will then describe clearly to the family if the patient cannot make the decision. Some patients are terrified of mutilating or extensive surgeries and having to go through traumatic surgeries towards the end of life, and being in a situation where they are recovering from surgeries when they are dying. So even there, they can articulate what kind of treatments they will accept. And then, of course, again, in tune with the kind of benefit that they can gain from those surgeries. Will it be beneficial in the short term? How extensive should a surgery be? And the quality of life that they will have at the end of life. This becomes an extremely important thing. In a very important study on what patients think would be aspects of a good death, um, two of the um, two of the things that were mentioned were dying with dignity, and the other one was compassionate care. So, in your will, you in a living will, you need to put down your idea of what a peaceful dying process, which is dignified, would be like, and also the kind of care that you would like to have towards the end of life, whether it is palliative care or comfort care, and at which point would you like to have that begin, while you are still conscious or when you are unconscious, and at what point would you like that to happen. So today, palliative care is now available in most hospitals, and there's a lot more discussion about people opting for palliative care towards the end of life, wishing that they die without encountering aggressive medical treatments that are largely futile. So this is one aspect of aging gracefully. I think that there is a plan to have a segment on palliation and palliative care.
Yes.
So we will leave that to that segment. But that is another point that one should include in the living will. The other thing one could think about is organ donation. If you are in a situation where you are dying in a hospital, there is a chance that you will be able to donate organs or even your whole body. And so these things should be also discussed and put into the living will, so that there is no confusion towards the end of life with your family members having to decide would that be appropriate or not. So your willingness or unwillingness to donate your organs should be expressed and understood by your loved ones. The other thing is what you would like to have done to your body. Sometimes it might not be in tune with what your other family members might want. So if you would like a cremation while others may think it is a burial, all those are the kind of things that you can put down as well, so that your family members understand and are less conflicted while these decisions are being made.
You spoke about different kinds of resources from the professional medical point of view as well as the compassionate dimension. The Catholic Church has been very conscious of this, and therefore, over a period of time, there have been various documents that have been there really to help us. Way back in 1980, Pope John Paul issued what is called Evangelium Vitae, which is the gospel of life. Of course, it covered all elements of life, right from conception to even death and aspects about euthanasia and all elements of life. It makes very interesting and fascinating reading, and that's there. We have certain elements of the Catechism of the Catholic Church, one point which I did read for you. Then there have been other, what they call dicasteries or departments of the Vatican that have brought out different elements. One was on euthanasia, the Declaration on Euthanasia, and then they've also brought out a very beautiful one in 2020, which was approved by Pope Francis, called Samaritanus Bonus, which is the Good Samaritan, which precisely speaks about some of these elements. Besides that, there are resources brought out on the national level. In fact, Olinda is part of this Bioethics Commission, of which I'm also a member, but which has brought out certain healthcare directives. I know it's a small segment are reading, but the more of us become familiar with documents such as these, we get a better understanding of what we can put into a living will. So it's not only conversations like these, but there are resources like that. And so it's so important for us to keep abreast. We update ourselves with so many matters, whether it's in information technology, the latest economic developments, different dimensions of our life. I think it's also important to understand the moral issues, the ethical issues, the faith issues that we need to do to upgrade and update ourselves also in these various and different areas. And again, as I said, some of these we can either indicate through links or maybe make available some of these resources as well.
Thank you very much.
I just want to know if I have cancer and I refuse the treatment, chemo and radiation, is that considered suicide and wrong? Or do I need to go through the process of chemo and radiation, which I don't want?
That's a very good question. No patient should be forced to undergo a treatment that they do not wish to have. That is the first thing I'd like to share with you, and it's part of patients' rights. So you need to consent to any treatment that is being offered to you. Because broadly, medical care is, and it's still, though we have progressed far, it is still an inexact science. And nothing is 100% sure about the way that treatments will pan out, based on the kind of treatments that there are, the variability in our bodies and how we will accept that kind of treatment, how we will react to it. So there is no accuracy to that extent of knowing what will happen. So no patient, should be denied the choice of treatment. Now, when you say cancer, if you do not take the treatment, it will inevitably, based on our science as we understand it, it would inevitably lead to death. But that is differentiated from suicide, which is taking of one's own life by unnatural means. So in this case, it will not be taking your own life, because the illness will take your life.
Okay. Father Jui, does the church consider this wrong, that I'm not taking a treatment and therefore it may lead to a form of suicide? Will the church accept?
I think given what Dr. Olinda has just said, given what I have read from the Catechism of the Catholic Church, if you see it as an aggressive medical treatment, because as you said, chemo or radio, which is something that you're not comfortable about, I think that comes under the category of allowing nature to take its course, because you're not comfortable with that kind of a treatment. And so, as I said, you're not initiating any process that will hasten the death. You're refusing to go through an aggressive medical treatment that is going to cause you more burdens than benefits. and it's going to cause you disproportionate amount of pain than any proportionate element of relief, or forget even about thinking about a cure. So I think that's the position.
Thank you, Father. Thank you, Doctor.
Doctor, regarding the living will, do they have to be notarized or registered? Can it be done? Or is it acceptable?
That's a good question. Living wills as a concept is relatively new in India, and it has come out of some judgments of the Supreme Court. So, as it is right now, any living will should be witnessed by at least 2 witnesses, and it should be notarized. Any subsequent version of this living will, if it is made, for example, you make a living will and then your health condition deteriorates, or you get a diagnosis that was not in your mind when you made that living will, then you might change the will. At that point also, the new version of the will should be notarized. Otherwise, the earlier version might hold, and there may be confusion with a more recent living will that is not notarized and the other version. And if it comes to a push, it might be that the notarized version may hold. So it's good that we follow the process for any version or every version of the living will as you make it.
Thank you.
Doctor, regarding the living will, if it is not written and expressed orally, will it carry weight?
Thank you for that question. It's important at this point of time that if a living will is made, it is a written document and it should be witnessed and notarized, as I said earlier. Having said that, it is not a bad idea to begin by sharing your wishes and your thoughts orally, if necessary, with your family and the doctor. Even when you express it orally, it helps the family members and it helps the doctor because they understand what you have in your mind and what your wishes are. And that helps them to make decisions together when you cannot make a decision. But if it has to have a legal weight and if it has to be implemented the way you want it, it is best that a living will is in a written form. So it cannot be called a living will until it is in a written form.
Yes.
So the basic understanding of your wishes will be there, but there could be a confusion. I will give you an example of this. Recently there was an elderly lady who was suffering from a chronic lung condition, and she had repeated admissions into hospital and ventilation in the ICU, and it went on for some years. She was living with her daughter at the time, and the daughter was the main caregiver. So after the last admission, when the patient came home, she told her daughter that the next time I have an acute episode, I do not want to go into the ICU. I don't mind taking some kind of a palliative or comfort care at the hospital, but I do not want to go to the ICU and have this ventilation happening to me again. So the daughter understood, and on one of their checkups, they also shared this with the doctor who was treating her. When the mother got sick again and she went to the hospital, there they began to give her some kind of compassionate care, understanding that she didn't want to go into the ICU again. And her condition, after a while, was getting worse. At this point, the doctor asked the caregiver, the daughter, to inform the other family members because it may not be very long that this lady had to live. And so her son was informed. And he came down from abroad and immediately looked at the condition of the mother, and he wanted to know why ventilation was not happening, why the mother was not in the ICU, why the mother was outside. And though the doctor and the daughter explained to him that the wishes of the mother were this, that she does not have ICU care, he was completely against it. And he said, he said that everything should be done for his mother, and he almost accused the doctor of not wanting to give her treatment, and he was threatening a legal action. And as far as the daughter, the caregiver, he insinuated that maybe, she was tired of caring for the mother and did not want to take up any further treatment. So it was a very difficult time when wishes are expressed orally and not shared with all members of the family and not written down. It can lead to a lot of confusion. In this particular case, finally the mother was put into the ICU again, though it was against her wishes, because at that time she was unable to take a decision on her own. By the time the son had come, her situation was worse than it was before. So she could not explain and to the doctor that she didn't want it. And she could not insist on her wishes. And so this happened to her. Subsequently, of course, then she passed away. But this kind of situation can arise when wishes are not written down and explained to the entire family.
Thank you, doctor.
I just like to take on from there, because what you have raised up is a situation that many families happen to face, and everybody who's there has got an opinion on it. But the primary person who has that opinion is the person who still has the faculties to think about, make that decision, informed decision, having spoken to the family members and to the doctors. And I think that respect should be given. It has more weight naturally if it's written, but anyway, the oral expression is also important. As Dr. Olinda pointed, it's the first step. But for some, it's the only step. And so when we look at that, and I'd like to bring another instance of a person who had a lung condition which was going to be progressive. And he, after reflecting about it, praying about it, talking to his own nephew who was a specialist, arrived at the decision that when my time comes, I do not want to be put into an invasive ventilator. And of course, that was going to be painful towards the end. And so everybody around has a sense of compassion, put him on the ventilator, but he was quite clear, because for him it would be prolonging death, when really he would have been into an induced coma or whatever. So he would keep breathing, but he would not be. And so he was very clear about that. He also took the step of saying, I do not want a lung transplant. The rest thought he was crazy. But the other people, some of them are saying, when he's in such a condition, we can arrange for the lung transplant. Why is the family not doing it? What are they withholding resources for? So sometimes the issue comes not only from the immediate family or the conflict between the siblings in the family, sometimes it comes from other people, society we might call them, the culture we might say. Why aren't they doing? They should do more. They don't know the inner dynamics of what's been happening, how this patient has made a journey, what the conversations, but they stand in fierce judgment trying to put these people on a guilt trip. And that is not acceptable at all. And so I thank you for raising this question, because this is symptomatic of so many such instances happening in society. And therefore, we need to really address it in matters like these.
Very beautifully put, Father Jovi. And I think this is what we are experiencing even in hospitals, where emotions run very high towards the end of life. And many decisions are made emotionally. Usually, it is for the worse. And the expectation that you should be doing everything for your loved one, or the expectation that your loved one who is dying should accept any treatment that is being offered. And this kind of emotional pressure that is experienced by the family, experienced even by the person who is dying, is something that is visible in hospitals and towards end of life. And health personnel get caught up in this decision making, which they feel should be happening with the patient, but they can see that the decisions are not being made with a clear head. They're being made with emotions, and it's not the best kind of decisions that they are taking. So even while doctors might be one step away from the issue and able to guide the patients and the relatives with information, the final decision should be taken with a cool head. Now, this can only happen if the family and the person concerned has thought about it, has actually evaluated it, beforehand, and has a calm head when they are in that dying process. And the decisions also that come out of such discussions should be taken in that spirit of what is best for the person concerned, what is good in this context and in this situation, and how can we make it as easy as possible for the patient. Not for the family appearance, not for my feeling of what I should feel like a heroic person, that I'm doing the best for my family member, but always looking at the patient's best interests over all other interests. And unless we've had these discussions in a compassionate and loving way in our homes and with our doctors, it's difficult to actually be dispassionate when we are at the moment of decision making in the hospital at the end of life. It's difficult. So again, it comes back to having these conversations early, embracing the idea of death, that it will happen to each one of us, listening to our family members of what they are afraid of, what they would not be comfortable with, and thinking of all other options. For example, dying at home. People are so afraid of dealing with dying at home. Where not many decades ago, most people died at home. Today, most people are dying in the hospital. And the family feels that this is, in a way, what is expected of them, that they should be receiving some medical care even at the time of death. So understanding that there are options to medical care, that there are options at the end of life when medical care doesn't hold out much promise. These are things to accept not only as families but as a community, so that we are not, as Father Juvi so beautifully put, in judgment of people who take these decisions to die surrounded by their family at home, in peace, with palliative care and with comfort care. Thank you for your
Thank you.
question again.
Doctor, supposing I agree to a treatment and then while through the treatment I realize that it's not benefiting me in any way and I'm really suffering now with that. Can I change my mind and withdraw the treatment?
As you come to the end of life, what are the options with regard to what will happen to you and to your body? She already spoke about organ donation, and I think that's something beautiful that more and more of us can commit ourselves by making sure that it's in a document so it's clear, and so many possibilities, whether it's eyes, kidney, so many people are waiting for a kidney transplant, the liver, whatever is that, so that is one way of, and some people who want to donate their body to a medical institution. So these many options are available, and one must think of these options for real. It's one way of doing good even after you're dead.
Doctor, when my mother-in-law was in ICU, as she was suffering inside and we were also suffering outside, and we didn't know what was happening to her, in that case, I think that doctor should tell us what is happening exactly, so that it'll be good for us to take the decision. Doctor.
Dr. Olinda, nowadays medicine has become a business and treatments are offered not as a form of an option, but patients are nudged into treatments that may possibly benefit the hospital more than the patient. This brings us to the end of the second part of our discussion on conversations about our final journey. We will continue this discussion on our next episode of Aging Gracefully, a talk show for Evergreens.